So in a studio, when it comes to walk and run cycles, they usually have a special department that takes care of it. So what you'll get as an animator is a generic walk and run cycle for basically every character on the show. Down the size of the studio, sometimes you'll even get different angles for that character. The point of this is to save time, because it would be super annoying if you had to redo a walk cycle for the same character every time they walked, in every single scene. Instead of building like 20 different walks for one character, it's better to have one really good walk that you can modify later. That's where the challenge happens. The challenge is, can you adapt that generic walk to fit your scene? Because usually it's not going to fit with the storyboards, you're going to need to change it in some way. For example, sometimes characters will be walking and talking with their hands. Sometimes they'll be walking towards the camera, maybe even taking from a walk into a run. So it's really good to know how to modify generic walks in the most efficient way possible, because you're going to be doing it a lot. So let's take the generic run cycle we did in our last live stream and adapt it to a scene just as if we were working in a studio. So for the premise of our scene, let's have our character scared, right? So we have to adjust the upper body. And to keep things interesting, why not have him run towards the camera? So we're going to have to change the run in perspective. Sounds tough? Let's jump into Toon Boom and figure it out. We brought in our run cycle that we did during our last live stream. We created a template and brought it in the scene. If you don't know how to do that, there's a video in the description showing you how to create a template. So I find when I'm modifying a run cycle, it's very, very important to keep the peg layers organized. What I mean by that is make sure you're working on the correct peg. So for example, in this run cycle, if we're on our master peg and we get rid of this keyframe, see how our character moved up a little bit? So the up and down movement is happening on this layer. So I don't want to work on that because I like how it is. But all this movement, so his arms, if I get rid of this keyframe, see how his arms move back? So his arm movement and everything on the upper body is happening on the upper body peg. If we look at the legs, same thing. Get rid of this. That's where the leg movement is happening. So make sure you're working on the correct layer. For us, we're just going to worry about the upper body, because I don't want to change the legs, I don't want to change the up and down, I just want to change his upper body. I'm going to collapse the upper body layer so it's closed, and now we're going to get to work. So I want his arms to kind of be out in front like this, and his head to be back, his eyes are up, and he's really, really scared. That classic scared posture. So we don't actually need any of these frames. I'm going to go in and get rid of them. So now, if we just play through, his upper body doesn't move. Let's try and adjust this a little bit. We're just going to, a real quick cheat. I'm just going to flip the mouth, like that. Since I'm never going to like change the mouth position, and I don't want to draw a new mouth, I'm just going to flip it. So he looks sad. Maybe if we have his hands like this, that looks better. Our main pose is blocked in. If we play through, right, he's looking pretty scared, right? His arms are back, his eyebrows are up, but he's looking pretty stiff. So we can go in now and add a little bit of like rocking with the arms, some leaning with the head, right, to kind of loosen this guy up just a little bit. Since his arms are up, he's not talking or anything, we can kind of make this like a cycle of its own. So we'll copy this frame here and here. And now as this is the passing position, as he passes, we'll have the arms drag back a bit. Same with the head, and why not the whole upper body? We'll copy this to this passing position. Now when we play this, right, there's a little bit more movement. We'll add some tweens and see how it looks. Right, that's okay, pretty loose. I want his arm to drag just a little bit more, so they don't stop at the same time as the head. I'll copy this frame here, play through this, right? He has a little bit more movement. He doesn't look as stiff. The last thing, we're going to grab these frames, convert it to 2s, and now we should play through, and there we go. We have our scared run cycle. All that's left to do now is to bring him forward in the camera, and this is the hard part. We need to know the right pegs to work on. So I already don't want to work on the master peg, because that's the up and down movement. I don't want to work on the upper body peg or the lower body peg, because that's the leg and the arm movement. So usually in a rig, there's a couple layers above the master peg that you can work on. In this case, we have our flip and our K1 layers. So these keyframes actually don't hold any animation, so I can get rid of that. So now we have 2 blank layers that we can use, and I want to use 2 of them because I need to use one layer to bring my character screen left across the screen, and I can use the other one to scale him forward. So keeping those 2 things separate is really going to help keep me organized, and also if I need to make any modifications, it's going to be very, very easy. So our scene is going to be 50 frames or 51 frames long. So the first thing I want to do is mark the beginning and the end of my cycle. This way, because I'm going to have to copy and paste these, I know where one cycle stops and one cycle ends. I'm going to go a little bit past the ending of my scene, right to the end of the cycle, and do a keyframe here. Extend our background, F5. So I'm going to go on my K1 layer, and I'm going to scale my guy way up like this, because he's running very, very close to the camera. Put a tween on this. He just goes, whew. Now I'm going to take my flip layer, and I'm going to bring him kind of across the screen like this, and maybe a little bit up as well. So now I can do a tween, and there we go. Now he's running towards the screen. But the thing is here, see, look at his feet. He kind of looks like he is on roller skates. If we step between frames, we'll see his foot here is sliding big time. So that should not be happening. When his foot's back here, he should be propelled forward. So what I need to do is bring him screen left even more. Let's do a crazy one. Let's go like this and see what happens. So if we take a look, 1, 2, that actually is okay, because it kind of, his foot is moving, but he's covering the same amount of distance relatively. I'm happy with my scaling and how much he's moving. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to keyframe my ending point, and I'm going to mark it in red, just in case I need to change something. So to finish this off, this is probably the hardest part of this whole process, is planting the feet. So if we look here, for example, the foot is there, but as we step to our next frame, it slides a little bit, right? So it should still be in this position as he pushes off. So if you notice here, I already started to kind of fix it. So from this pose to this pose, the foot is kind of planted, but it's looking a little bit weird, right? So we actually have to go in with our onion skin and adjust the individual pieces of the foot so they match perfectly. And this part is probably the hardest part, because it's so hard to do. Like, see, that's looking a little bit better. Let's move this over a bit. Very subtle movements. Right, that looks good. When he's running, you're not really going to notice it. So his foot sticks as he runs, and then he comes forward again. Now let's do the other leg. So here, his foot plants like this. So I'm going to need to go in and move it. So here, I'm going to actually have to move the whole foot And this is the hard part, because you don't want to make big movements that are really noticeable and pop, but you do need to have the foot planted in the same spot. So let's real zoom in. I'm going to move his foot here. I'm going to try and keep it in relatively the same spot. So now if we go this, it's looking better. We just got to make sure this isn't getting skewed as much. Move it down, move it in where it should be, and then drop this guy down. There. So his foot is planted. And same thing, this is kind of a big popping motion, so we have to adjust this leg as well. So I'm going to bring it down like there, and maybe bring it in because it's not as close to the camera in this frame. Right? And it has a better arc. It's hard to tell because he's going so quick, but it does make a difference. It's a cycle. You'd think you could just do it once and get it over with, but you can't because he's a different size. So we need to adjust this foot as well. This one should be a little bit easier because it's sort of cut off. We'll bring it in. There you go. And then he runs off screen and we don't have to worry about it at all. So that's it, guys. We used our generic run cycle, we followed the scene's parameters just like we would at a regular studio, and we got our finished result. And it took way less time if we had to build this scared run from the ground up. So you can kind of see why studios use this technique of just having a generic cycle that you can modify and drop into any scene. The most difficult part is the planting of the feet, and that's just because the feet are kind of cheating, right? They're not really in this angle. We don't have the angle that we need for the feet, but we don't want to redraw the foot because it takes too much time. So we kind of have to cheat it and make it look like it's planting as he's moving forward, so it kind of tricks the audience into thinking, yeah, that's the right perspective. That's all I have, guys, for modifying a generic walk, and it's basically about keeping your peg layers organized, so understanding what animation is on what peg and when to modify that layer. Is actually really common in a studio, so it's a really good idea to get very comfortable modifying generic walk cycles or run cycles. That's it for now, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see everybody in the next video.